Good Times wasn't just groundbreaking, it was a battlefield. The first African-American nuclear family on TV fought poverty on screen and chaos behind the cameras. Stars walked off. Scripts got rewritten overnight. And one catchphrase, it nearly destroyed everything they built. These are 20 secrets about Good Times that have been hidden for decades. 20. The show was never supposed to exist.
Mrs. Evans, I hope you didn't have any trouble finding us.
Oh, no, ma'am. I heard you all the way from the bus stop.
Good Times didn't start as an idea of its own. It was an accident born from desperation and brilliance. Norman Lear created Florida Evans as a maid on Maude, played by Esther Rolla, with such dignity and fire that audiences fell in love instantly. She wasn't just comic relief. She was real. Fans wrote letters demanding more. They wanted to know about her life, her family, her world beyond serving white families. So Lear took a gamble. He pitched a spin-off centered entirely on a black family living in a Chicago housing project, struggling with poverty but rich in love and resilience. CBS executives hesitated. They worried middle America wouldn't watch. They questioned if the format could sustain itself. But Lear refused to back down, and on February 8, 1974, Good Times premiered to over 30 million viewers. It wasn't just a show. It was a mirror held up to communities that television had ignored for decades, and once it aired, there was no going back. 19. Esther Roll. Almost refused the lead role.
This is Oscar Harris, the head of my department. Oscar, this is my husband, James.
Hello.
And these are my...
Before she became America's beloved Florida Evans, Esther Roll had serious doubts. She'd fought for dignity in every role she played, and when Norman Lear offered her the spin-off, she read the pilot script with suspicion. What she found troubled her deeply. The show focused heavily on JJ, the oldest son, who cracked jokes, acted foolishly, and prioritized laughs over substance. Rolle saw a dangerous stereotype, the buffoonish black man performing for white audiences. She told Lear she wouldn't do it unless changes were made. The family needed depth. James, the father, needed strength and presence. The struggles had to be real, not cartoonish. Lear listened, sort of. He promised to balance the comedy with serious storytelling, to give James Evans a strong voice, to make Florida the backbone of the family. Roll agreed, but with one condition. If the show ever betrayed its mission, she'd walk. It was a promise she would eventually keep. Years later, she admitted she took the role because she believed black children needed to see a functional family fighting together, loving hard and surviving with dignity. She didn't want fame, she wanted impact. 18. John Amos was cast. At the last minute.
Really grown. Grown. Well, what you expect, man? It's better.
James Evans wasn't always John Amos. In the early stages of casting, producers considered several actors for the role of the strong, hard-working father trying to keep his family afloat. Some were too soft, others are too angry. None felt right. Then someone mentioned John Amos, who'd recently made waves playing Gordy the Weatherman on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. He had presence, warmth, authority, everything James needed. But there was a problem. Amos was already committed to another project, and his schedule was tight. Lear's team scrambled, reworking shooting schedules, negotiating release dates, and making last-minute deals just to lock him in. When Amos finally arrived on set for the first table read, he walked in without rehearsal, barely familiar with the script. But the moment he spoke his first line as James Evans, the room went silent. He didn't just play a father, he embodied one. Strong but not harsh, tired but never broken. Esther Roll later said she knew instantly they'd found the right man. Amos brought a gravity that balanced the show's lighter moments, and his chemistry with Roll felt lived in from day one. 17. Ifikwa Jimmy Walker was a stand-up comic with zero acting experience.
A friend of mine says, I couldn't believe J.J. Walker has not been off the American airwaves in America.
When Jimmy Walker auditioned for the role of J.J. Evans, he'd never acted professionally in his life. He was a stand-up comedian grinding through New York clubs, working construction during the day, chasing laughs at night. His agent sent him to the Good Times audition almost as a joke, figuring he'd never land it. Walker showed up nervous, unsure, reading lines like he was performing a bit. But something clicked. The producers saw raw energy, natural timing, and a willingness to go big. They offered him the part on the spot. Walker accepted, but he had no idea what he was walking into. On set, he struggled with blocking, camera marks, and hitting emotional beats. Esther Rolle and John Amos had years of theater training. Janet Dubois was a seasoned performer. Walker was winging it, learning on the fly, making mistakes. But his inexperience also brought spontaneity. He ad-libbed constantly, threw in physical comedy, and delivered punchlines with manic energy that test audiences loved. Producers leaned into it, giving JJ more screen time, more jokes, more catchphrases. And while Walker's star rose fast, tensions brewed quietly behind the scenes. 16. Dynamite was never in the script.
Oh, lucky person, you got the number right, because you are talking to Kid a Dynamite! Dynamite!
The catchphrase that defined a generation wasn't written by Norman Lear or any staff writer. It came straight from Jimmy Walker's stand-up act. During rehearsals for an early episode, Walker was riffing between takes, testing different reactions to a joke. He threw his arms up and shouted, "Dynamite!" in that high-pitched, explosive way that became iconic. The crew laughed. Someone said, "Do that again." Walker kept using it, ad-libbing it into scenes, pushing it into punchlines. Producers noticed audiences going wild during test screenings every time he said it, so they started writing it into scripts, building entire episodes around JJ's outbursts. Within months, Dynamite was everywhere. Lunchboxes, t-shirts, posters, even political campaigns. Walker became the breakout star. But not everyone celebrated. Esther Roll hated it. She saw the catchphrase turning J.J. into a clown, reducing a show about black struggle into a minstrel show. John Amos agreed. They confronted the producers, demanding that the show refocus on the family's real issues, not on cheap laughs. But the ratings were undeniable, and the network wasn't listening. 15. Esther Rolle and John Amos hated the direction of the show.
A group of people can get along. It doesn't have to be conflict on the set. And when you want to go to work, you can't wait to the next.
Behind the laughter, a war was brewing. Esther Rolle and John Amos signed on to portray a strong black family navigating systemic poverty with dignity. But as the show grew, they watched it morph into something else. JJ's antics dominated storylines. His catchphrases sold merchandise. Serious episodes about unemployment, police brutality, and education got sidelined for slapstick comedy and cheap gags. Roll felt betrayed. She'd warned Norman Lear this could happen, and now it was happening in real time. Amos was even more vocal. He confronted writers, challenged producers, and pushed for scripts that centered James as a father, fighting to protect his family from a broken system. Both actors believed the show had a responsibility, not just to entertain, but to represent black life authentically. But the network saw dollar signs. Jimmy Walker was the star. His face moved ratings. And when Rolla and Amos pushed back too hard, they were told to fall in line or leave. The tension became unbearable. Cast members stopped speaking off camera, rehearsals turned into arguments, and the show that started as revolutionary slowly bent toward what sold rather than what mattered. 14. John Amos was fired for fighting with writers.
Damn!
It wasn't a mutual decision. John Amos was forced out. By the end of season 3, his relationship with producers had deteriorated completely. He clashed constantly over scripts, demanding more depth for James Evans, more focus on the family's struggles, and less reliance on JJ's buffoonery. Writers grew tired of his notes. Producers labeled him difficult. And when Amos refused to stop pushing, they made a choice. They killed James Evans off screen. In one of the most shocking moments in sitcom history, Florida receives a telegram informing her that James died in a car accident in Mississippi. No final episode, no goodbye scene, just gone. Amos found out the same way fans did when the script was finalized. He was devastated, not for himself, but for what it meant. The show had removed the strong black father figure, the man working multiple jobs to keep his family together because he demanded respect. Roll was furious. She threatened to quit on the spot, but the network didn't budge. They moved forward without James Evans, and the show was never the same. 13. Esther Roll quit the show in protest.
I give a lot of that to Esther Roll because she wanted a husband on the show. They wanted to do it without a husband, and she said, no, I want a husband on the show.
After John Amos was fired, Esther Roll stayed for one more season, but she was miserable. Without James, the show lost its foundation. JJ became the undisputed star, and storylines grew more absurd. Roll fought every script, rewrote her own lines, and pleaded with producers to restore balance. They ignored her. So at the end of season 4, Rolla made her choice. She walked away. No negotiation, no compromise. She told the press exactly why. The show had become an insult to black families, a parade of stereotypes dressed up as comedy. She said JJ was 18 years old, unemployed, and illiterate, and America was laughing at him instead of with him. Roll refused to be part of it anymore. Columbia Broadcasting System panicked. Good Times was still a ratings giant, and losing both parents seemed impossible. But Roll didn't care about ratings. She cared about dignity. For one full season, Good Times continued without Florida Evans. New characters were introduced, storylines floundered, and audiences noticed something missing. The heart of the show had walked out the door, and no amount of catchphrases could bring it back. 12. The show brought Esther Roll back with major conditions.
Now, when I saw how much it cost, you know, the boy really ain't all that bad.
Oh, Larry isn't bad at all. Mrs. Baker.
By season 6, Good Times was struggling. Ratings dipped. Critics called it a shell of its former self, and fans kept asking the same question: where's Florida? CBS knew they needed her back, but Esther Roll wasn't interested in returning to the same mess she'd left. So, when producers approached her, she came prepared with a list of non-negotiable demands. First, JJ had to grow up. No more lazy, illiterate clown. He needed a job, ambition, and self-respect. Second, the show had to tackle real issues again: poverty, healthcare, systemic racism. Third, Florida needed a storyline that honored her strength, not just her suffering. And finally, she wanted script approval. Producers hesitated, but desperation won. They agreed to almost everything. Roll returned for the final season, and the shift was immediate. JJ got a job. The family dealt with serious struggles. Florida even remarried, finding love again after James's death. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. Roll had fought her way back on her own terms, proving that even in Hollywood, dignity could be worth more than a paycheck. 11. Jeanette Dubois improvised Willona's entire personality.
Well. Balderman Davis. What brings you here?
I am dedicated to my civic duty.
Willona Woods was supposed to be a minor character, Florida's sassy neighbor who popped in for a few jokes. But Jeanette Dubois had other plans. A trained singer, dancer, and actress, Dubois brought a fire to Willona that no one expected. She improvised catchphrases, invented backstories, and gave the character a vulnerability hidden under all that sass. When the cameras rolled, Dubois didn't just deliver lines, she created moments. Her fashion sense became iconic. Bold prints, head wraps, platform shoes. She made Willona the cool aunt everyone wanted to be. And when producers introduced Penny, an abused child Willona eventually adopts, Dubois pushed for the storyline to be handled with care and depth. She fought for Penny's arc to show real trauma and healing, not just a sitcom plot device. It worked. Willona became one of the most beloved characters on the show, a woman who loved hard, lived loud, and proved that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just shows up every day and refuses to break. Dubois never got the credit she deserved for building Willona from scratch, but fans knew. They saw her magic in every scene. 10. The show tackled child abuse when no one else would. In 1977, Good Times aired an episode that changed television forever. Penny's Christmas introduced viewers to a little girl covered in bruises, burned with an iron by her own mother. It was brutal, unflinching, and absolutely necessary. Norman Lear didn't soften it. The episode showed Penny flinching at loud voices, hiding injuries, and lying to protect her abuser. Willona discovered the truth and made the hardest call of her life, reporting the abuse and eventually adopting Penny herself. Network executives were terrified. They worried advertisers would pull out, that parents would protest, that the episode was too dark for a sitcom. But Lear and the writers refused to back down. They consulted child psychologists, abuse survivors, and social workers to get every detail right. When the episode aired, phone lines lit up. Not with complaints, but with thanks. Thousands of viewers called to share their own stories, to say they finally felt seen. Teachers showed the episode in schools. Social workers used it in training. And suddenly, a sitcom about a family in the projects was doing more to raise awareness of child welfare than any PSA ever could. Janet Dubois later said, filming those scenes broke her heart, but she knew they mattered. Penny wasn't just a character. She was every child suffering in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to see the truth and do something about it. Good Times didn't just entertain, it intervened, and it saved lives in ways no one could measure. 9. The cast couldn't stand. Just Jimmy Walker off camera.
I will honestly say, I don't remember ever speaking a word to Esther the whole time she was there.
On screen, the Evans family looked tight-knit and loving. Off screen, it was a different story. Jimmy Walker's sudden fame created a rift that never fully healed. As JJ became the breakout star, Walker's ego grew. He started showing up late to rehearsals, demanding script changes, and treating the show like it belonged to him. Esther Roll stopped speaking to him unless cameras were rolling. She later said in interviews that Walker represented everything she fought against: a black man willing to play the fool for white approval and a paycheck. John Amos was more direct. He confronted Walker multiple times, telling him to show respect to the veterans on set and to stop undermining the show's message. Walker brushed it off, believing his popularity gave him power. Even Bernadette Stanis, who played Thelma, admitted years later that Walker's behavior made the set uncomfortable. He'd crack jokes during emotional scenes, refuse to rehearse seriously, and talk over other actors during table reads. Janet Dubois tried to keep the peace, but even she grew frustrated. The tension grew so thick that cast members requested separate dressing rooms and avoided one another during breaks. When Good Times finally ended in 1979, there was no tearful goodbye between Walker and his TV family, just silence, relief, and decades of unspoken resentment that would surface in interviews years later when everyone finally felt free to speak the truth. 8. Tess. That's Bernadette Stanis, was sexually harassed throughout the series.
Gorgeous, you're sweet. You're the best woman I've ever met. And I'm not marrying you for your cooking.
Wait. Would you repeat that?
Bernadette Stanis was just 19 when she started playing Thelma Evans, the smart, beautiful daughter navigating adolescence in the projects. What audiences didn't see was the nightmare she endured behind the scenes. Stanis later revealed that she faced constant sexual harassment from crew members, producers, and guest stars. Inappropriate comments about her body, unwanted touching during rehearsals, requests for private meetings that had nothing to do with the script. She was young, terrified, and convinced that speaking up would end her career before it started. So, She stayed silent, developing tricks to protect herself. She'd wear oversized clothes to rehearsals. She'd never be alone in a room with certain men. She'd laugh off comments that made her skin crawl, pretending everything was fine. Esther Rowley noticed and became her protector, making sure Stannis was never cornered, intervening when men got too close, and giving her a safe person to confide in. But Rolla couldn't be everywhere, and the harassment continued for all 6 seasons. Stannis carried that trauma for decades, only speaking publicly about it in recent years when the Me Too movement gave survivors permission to break their silence. She said the hardest part wasn't just the harassment itself, but the loneliness of going through it while pretending to be happy on camera. Good Times launched her career, but it also taught her that being a young black woman in Hollywood meant surviving dangers the audience would never see. 7. The show was filmed in front of a live audience with no breaks.
The original cast, please welcome the Evans family, Bernadette Stannis, Janae Dubois, and Jimmy Walker.
Most sitcoms filmed with live audiences built in breaks, gave actors time to reset, and allowed for retakes if jokes didn't land. Good Times didn't work that way. Norman Lear insisted on a continuous performance, believing the energy of a live crowd kept the show raw and real. The cast had to deliver entire episodes straight through with minimal stopping, performing like it was a theater, not television. If someone forgot a line, they had to improvise through it. If a joke bombed, they couldn't redo it. The audience's genuine reactions, laughter, gasps, and silence were baked into every scene. This approach created magic, but also pressure. Actors couldn't hide behind edits. They had to be sharp, present, and vulnerable all at once. Esther Rowley thrived under this format, using the audience's energy to fuel emotional scenes. John Amos struggled at first, unused to the relentless pace, but eventually found his rhythm. Jimmy Walker loved it, feeding off the crowd like he was back doing stand-up. But the format also exposed weaknesses. When scripts were bad, there was nowhere to hide. When tensions ran high between cast members, the audience could feel it. Some of the show's most uncomfortable moments, awkward pauses, missed beats, and forced smiles made it to air because there simply wasn't time to fix them. The result was a show that felt alive, electric, and occasionally messy in the most human way possible. 6. Ralph Carter was a Broadway star at 13.
Sidewalk tree, hanging low, won't forget.
When Ralph Carter auditioned for the role of Michael Evans, the politically conscious youngest son, he wasn't some unknown kid hoping for a break. He was already a Broadway sensation. At age 9, Carter originated the role of Travis Younger in the Tony Award-winning musical Raisin, earning rave reviews and a Drama Desk Award nomination. By 13, he'd performed for thousands, mastered complex choreography, and worked with theater legends. So, when Good Times came calling, Carter brought a professionalism that stunned the cast. He hit his marks perfectly, delivered lines with precision, and never needed more than one take. But his talent also created problems. Writers struggled to balance Michael's character, making him so intellectually advanced that he sometimes felt more like a lecture than a kid. Carter fought for Michael to have flaws, to be wrong sometimes, to struggle with being the smartest person in the room. He wanted depth, not perfection. Producers occasionally listened, giving Michael moments of vulnerability, such as when he grappled with peer pressure or felt embarrassed by his family's poverty. But too often, Michael became a mouthpiece for social issues rather than a fully realized character. Carter did his best with what he was given, infusing scenes with emotion and honesty even when the writing felt preachy. Years later, he admitted Good Times was the biggest opportunity of his career, but also the most frustrating because he knew Michael could have been so much more than the smart kid archetype. 5. The show's theme song, Almost Didn't Happen. Good Times, the song that opened every episode with those unforgettable lyrics about temporary layoffs and easy credit ripoffs, almost never existed. Originally, Norman Lear wanted an instrumental theme, something jazzy and upbeat without words. He felt lyrics would be too on the nose, spelling out the show's premise when the episodes should do that work. But songwriter Dave Grusin disagreed. He partnered with lyricist Alan and Marilyn Bergman to create something different, a theme song that didn't shy away from poverty, but celebrated survival anyway. They wrote lyrics that acknowledged struggle. Ain't we lucky we got 'em? Good times. Not ironic, not bitter, just real. When they presented it to Lear, he hesitated. The network hated it, calling it too downbeat, too negative for a comedy. But test audiences heard something else. They heard their lives reflected back with honesty and hope. They heard a song that didn't promise escape, just resilience. Lear gave in, and Jim Gilstrap and Blinky Williams recorded the iconic vocal version. The song climbed the charts, became a cultural touchstone, and defined the show's identity more than any script ever could. Decades later, artists from hip-hop to gospel have sampled or covered it, proving that the theme song Almost Thrown Away became one of the most enduring pieces of television music history. 4. The show was filmed at CBS Television City, not Chicago.
Ma, I got my room spotless, and I even got my lipstick stains off of my autographed picture of Stevie Wonder.
That's what I call clean.
Good Times was set in the Cabrini Green housing projects of Chicago, one of the most notorious public housing developments in America, but the cast never set foot there during production. Every episode was filmed entirely at CBS Television City in Los Angeles on sound stages designed to look like cramped project apartments. Set designers studied photographs of Cabrini Green, measured actual units, and recreated the claustrophobic layouts, peeling wallpaper, narrow hallways, and worn furniture down to the smallest detail. They wanted authenticity, even if it was manufactured. The audience believed they were watching a family in Chicago, because the details felt lived in. The crowded kitchen where Florida cooked endless meals, the bedroom the kids shared with zero privacy, and the living room that doubled as everything else. But filming in LA created strange contradictions. Guest stars playing Chicago characters spoke with California accents. Episodes set in winter showed no visible breath despite supposed freezing temperatures. And the view outside the Evans window, supposedly overlooking the projects, was clearly a painted backdrop. None of it mattered to viewers because the show's emotional truth transcended geography. The Evans family could have been in Chicago, Detroit, New York, or any city where black families fought systems designed to keep them down. The project wasn't just a location, it was a symbol, and symbols don't need to be geographically accurate to cut deep. 3. Good Times was the first show to depict black love.
And what so many people loved about it was the positivity of family, because that's what's really there a lot of times.
Yes.
Now, that's not the part that gets portrayed in the...
Authentically before Good Times, black couples on television were either absent or reduced to punchlines. Black fathers were missing, weak or comedic. Black mothers were maids, mammies, or caricatures. But James and Florida Evans changed everything. They argued about money, disagreed about parenting, struggled with exhaustion and fear, but they loved each other with a fierceness that felt revolutionary. Their relationship wasn't perfect or idealized. It was real. James worked multiple jobs and still couldn't make ends meet, and that failure ate at him. Florida held the family together emotionally, but she was tired, so tired, and it showed. Yet in quiet moments, they'd sit together on that worn couch, holding hands, stealing kisses, reminding each other why they kept fighting. Those scenes weren't written for laughs. They were written to show black love as tender, resilient, and worthy of celebration. When John Amos was fired and James was killed off, something irreplaceable was lost. The show tried to continue, even giving Florida a new husband later, but it never recaptured that original magic. Because James and Florida weren't just characters, they were proof that black families could be whole, loving, and complex. They were a direct challenge to every stereotype televisions had ever sold, and for 3 seasons, they won. 2. The final episode ended with hope, not escape.
Now, JJ, what is this sheet doing off of our bed?
This is part of your anniversary present. I'm using this sheet to keep it as a...
By the time Good Times reached its final episode in August 1979, fans expected a fairy tale ending. Maybe the family would move out of the projects, maybe they'd win the lottery or get some miraculous break. But Norman Lear refused to lie. In the series finale, the Evans family gets a rare chance to move to a better neighborhood and leave the projects behind. It's everything they've dreamed of for 6 years. But at the last minute, they discover the building they're moving to has serious problems, violations, corruption, and the same systemic failures that trapped them in Cabrini Green. They could take the apartment anyway, escape the projects physically, but land in another broken situation. Or they could stay, keep fighting, keep surviving in the place they know. The episode ends with the family choosing to stay, not because they've given up, but because they've learned that geography doesn't change systems. The real victory isn't escape, it's resilience. It's staying together. It's refusing to let poverty break their love. The final shot shows the family laughing together in that cramped apartment, still broke, still struggling, still whole. Some critics called the ending depressing, but for families living similar realities, it was honest. It was a refusal to sell false hope, and a reminder that survival itself is resistance. 1. The show's legacy was bigger than television.
Wanted to do it without a husband. And she said, no, I want a husband on the show because I was raised with a father and a mother, and I know I was raised.
Good Times ended over 4 decades ago, but its impact never stopped. It was the first show to center a black family fighting poverty without shame or apology. It proved that audiences, black and white, wanted authentic stories, not stereotypes. It launched conversations about child abuse, unemployment, police brutality, and systemic racism at a time when sitcoms rarely touched those subjects. The show made stars out of its cast, but it also cost them. Esther Roll and John Amos sacrificed their roles to fight for dignity. Bernadette Stanis survived harassment to deliver a character that young black girls could admire. Ralph Carter brought brilliance to a role that could have been one-dimensional. And yes, even Jimmy Walker, despite all the controversy, gave millions of black kids a character who made them laugh during hard times. Decades later, Good Times is studied in film schools, quoted in hip-hop lyrics, and referenced in think pieces about representation. It's been criticized, dissected, and debated, but it's never been forgotten. Because it dared to show that black families in the projects weren't tragic figures waiting to be saved. They were whole human beings, loving, fighting, laughing, and surviving with a strength that no system could destroy. Good Times didn't just entertain, it testified, and that testimony still echoes today. Good Times didn't just break barriers, it held up a mirror and refused to look away. If these secrets shocked you, hit like, smash subscribe, and tell us in the comments which fact hit hardest. Because in a world that wanted perfection, Good Times gave us truth. And sometimes truth is the only thing worth keeping alive.